There are times when it is really uncomfortable to be a Christian, when we're isolated, when we stand out a mile from our peers, where we just can't join in with whatever is going on. And the temptation at such times is to look for ways in which we can keep hold of our faith and lose all the discomfort, ways in which we can merge into the background of our society and practice our religion in peace. If we don't resist that temptation, then our religion will be all we've got. Our relationship with the God who called us and who made us his people, that will be struggling until we wake up and remember what he is doing in us and with us. In his own words to Moses about the Passover, I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. That's Exodus 12:12. Now when we think judgment, we tend to think punishment, fire from heaven, off with their heads sort of thing. But of course the gods of Egypt are not real. They only exist in the minds of the Egyptians. So judgment here means what it very often means in the Bible, that God is going to show these things up for what they are. He's going to expose the unreality of the false gods, which is of course exactly what happens. Pharaoh, who is one of those false gods, is told by the Lord through Moses exactly what is going to happen on Passover night. See Exodus 11. So there's no way in which he and the rest of Egypt's gods can say that they were taken by surprise. They have plenty of time to prepare. And these gods have home advantage, don't they? This is Egypt after all, and these are meant to be Egypt's gods. So all the Egyptians can surely sleep soundly in their beds under the protection of the gods that they take so much time and trouble to worship. And in the morning there was not an Egyptian house without someone dead. That's Exodus 12:30. Because their gods are not gods at all and can protect no one from anything. Thus, one half of God's judgment upon the gods of Egypt. It was always in his plan as he revealed it to Abraham in Genesis 15. And you see there the other half of that plan to expose the false gods. And it emerges in that chapter. God tells Abraham, your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves. Genesis 15:13 and onwards. In a sense, God's people are part of the judgment on Egypt. There they are, with no visible means of support, worshipping this God whom Egypt refuses to recognize. It should be so easy to knock some sense into them. But instead, the other half of God's judgment on the gods of Egypt is that the Egyptians don't just wake up and mourn their dead. They look across at their Israelite neighbours' houses and see that they are not in mourning. And what makes those Israelites so visible is their obedience to the commands of their God. You can see clearly they worship their God and they're okay. You've relied on the gods of Egypt, and it is still God's plan to bring judgment on the gods of the nations. That's why it's a problem when his people put their trust in those gods themselves. If you read Isaiah 42:18-25, that's the problem. They had his instructions and they rejected them. Imagine if Israel had done that in Egypt on Passover night. So what is God going to do? Well, he's still going to expose the false gods, which means his own people will find out the hard way what happens when you rely on false gods for protection. But then read Isaiah 43:1-13. He is going to redeem his people before the nations. As God's people, we ourselves have a part to play in his plan to expose the false gods. And of course we can't play our part unless we're worshipping the true God. And the only way that people see the difference is exactly that place of discomfort that we all want to avoid if possible. It isn't. Jesus is God's ultimate judgment on the false gods of the world. He doesn't come as the all-conquering king sweeping all before him. He makes himself nothing. Preaching the truth in word and deed, it should be so easy to crush him. In John 18 on Sunday we saw the leaders gathering to pronounce judgment on Jesus. We know how that ended. But first, the cross and the way of the cross. Read Matthew 25:31-46 and think again about who are these brothers of mine. That's verse 40. The hungry, thirsty, strangers, naked, sick and imprisoned. In great discomfort, but again, the king's instruments of judgment. I think that's the disciples. I think it's us. Let's not give up when the going gets tough. God is still exposing the false gods of the nations. If you're happy, thank you for listening.